Hi there, my name is Tawiso Mutsuning, and I hope that you are doing well on this lovely day. I've got my lovely hat here, I hope you could see it, and I've got my coffee. So I would encourage you to also have your coffee here. Right, so today the basic thing that we'll be doing is I'll be taking you through Learning Unit 1, which basically looks at accounting teaching. The one most important thing that we have to do first is to know what are the outcomes of this unit. So the first part is you should be able to list and briefly explain the history behind the fundamental principles of CAPS that underpin the accounting curriculum. And secondly, be able to apply these principles to lessons when planning and teaching. Over the years, we see that accounting has been taught in a way that tends to be more traditional, whereby learners just go to class, basically sit and listen to what the teacher does and says. Unfortunately, during those times, learners don't have much of a voice in terms of what is going on in the class. So, what we're saying is that learning accounting should be exciting. Learners should be able to come to a class and be able to learn meaningful skills that will be able to assist them to be able to become better people, better employees overall, because you want to have a fully developed student, right? So every day there are things that are happening in business, in the economy, and in government. We just saw what happened in terms of the COVID-19, and it has affected everyone from young to old, from rich to poor, right? So in a sense of you teaching accounting, you need to be smart enough to know what are those important things that affect our learners in terms of accounting that you could bring into class and align it to the topics that you're teaching, right? So integration is important when it comes to the teaching of accounting, right? So an example that we've used there is the presentation of the national budget by the Minister of Finance, which sort of affects each and every person within the country of South Africa, right? So take that, bring it into class, play it for your learners, and ask them what do they think, right? So they need to be able to have those four critical skills that are needed in the 21st century, which is communication, which is critical thinking, which is creativity and collaboration. Right. So as they're able to do that, they're able to acquire an understanding of accounting disciplinary concepts. The pedagogical strategies that you use are meaningful because they're able to learn from them, and the techniques which are crucial towards bridging the gap between theory and practice. Right. So an example that I have here, it's of these three pictures. The first picture basically it shows the South African president who normally does the State of the Nation address. In this context, what happens is that the finance minister and his team will be listening to what the president has planned for the year, and from there they're able to sit down and actually devise the the budget for the whole year, right? So our learners need to understand in accounting the importance of the State of the Nation address, because in terms of how people's lives are going to be affected will be determined by what the president says. The businesses in terms of their profitability, um, the economy in terms of its performance is going to be affected by what the president says, right? So our learners need to be analytical in a sense to say, how do we now provide advice if we are accountants? How do we make provision for our companies that will be, responsible for, right? So this is one example. The second picture that we have is of ESCO. Now, what we see at the moment is that there's current load sheddings that are going on. And unfortunately, with the load shedding, it affects business, it affects the economy, it affects the government, and it affects the livelihood of every person within the country of South Africa. So our learners need to be able to say, in terms of us being accountants, in terms of our own lives, how does ESCOM now affect us? So as a teacher, you need to be able to bring in these real life events and be able to explain it, right? And then the last picture, which is sort of a more controversial one, it talks about the coalition government. Now, given the current events that are taking place in the country, a lot of people tend to sort of lose hope in terms of the future, right? So, as they lose hope, obviously now there's a likelihood that there's going to be a coalition government. Let us have our kids talking about this because it will be able to assist them to be able to predict what's going to happen in terms of accounting. Now, one question that teachers need to ask themselves is, how can one become a good accounting teacher? How do I go beyond my comfort zone in efforts of making sure that my learners are able to get this accounting and actually enjoy it? Two, what is the most appropriate teaching approach for teaching the discipline? As per the CAPS document, we need to be using a learner-centered approach. And the theoretical framework that actually underpins this is the constructivism. So we need to be aware of it. We need to be able to apply it in terms of our classroom context. The third question is, how can we prepare learners for practice? Because we don't want them to be good theorists, but we want them to take the theory and take it into practice. Lastly, how can one encourage learners to have a business way of thinking? We see that in terms of jobs, unfortunately, with the fourth industrial revolution, there's a certain skills that are needed. So one way of making up of the jobs that are being lost is our learners coming up with new businesses, right? So you need to push them to that space. Having that background that we had in accounting, I think it's fair that we move on in terms of learning about the curriculum development, giving just a historical overview. Over the years, the curriculum of South Africa has changed a number of times, and there were certain factors at play. Let's look at during apartheid, unfortunately, a certain race of people were disadvantaged in terms of the type of education that they got, so it was more of an inferior education. So post apartheid, what happened is the government that said we need to bring everyone and actually put them on sort of the same level. So the curriculum needed to be changed because certain races, unfortunately, the type of education that they were getting, like I was mentioned, was inferior, right? So it changed, and in changing, everyone, regardless of race, of age, of economic status, was given the same education so that at least they have the same advantages, right? So over the years, there have been four distinct changes that have occurred since then. Let us look at them. The first one was the interim curriculum, which was having a philosophy of an outcome based education. So it was more outcome based more than anything, right? So this was introduced in 1996. In 1997, we then had the curriculum 2005. So remember now, the one introduced in 1996 was sort of interim, and they needed one that they could use over a long term period. So that's when the curriculum 2005 came in. The approach that was used then was more of a teacher centered. Now come to 2002, where we had the revised national curriculum statement. So what they did is they took a number of factors within the curriculum and actually changed them to say, how about we move from teacher centered into a learner centered approach, right? So hence they revised it in 2002. And then and again in 2013, it was changed to the curriculum and assessment policy statement. So those are the big changes that have taken place over the years. All right. So as mentioned in the previous slides, we note that the change or the transformation in the South African curriculum came about as influenced by these three factors. Well, there's a number of factors, but these ones sort of played a huge role. One, racism. Remember, a certain group of people tended to treat other races in an inferior way. So they wanted to balance that to say, let's all be equal. Let everyone be treated equally. Discrimination. There was discrimination in terms of religion, discrimination in terms of abilities, right? And the last one, which is inequalities, basically looking at the economic abilities. So they sort of put certain people aside, right? So that's why we had to have a curriculum change. So in a nutshell, the adoption of the new constitution after the country became a democracy, it provided a basic for that curriculum transformation. And as you've seen in the previous slides, this led to an interim curriculum whereby the philosophy of outcome-based education was sort of pushed to say, let us have these outcomes that need to be achieved. So the outcome-based education promoted curricula and assessment based on constructivism, opposed to the traditional educational approaches that were used. The curriculum 2005 came through the National Qualification Framework, which its main aim was to eradicate the ills of the apartheid education. As mentioned, a certain race of people received an inferior curriculum, whereas another one enjoyed a quality one, right? So curriculum 2005 came as a way to try and sort that out. And with the curriculum 2005 being reviewed, it then led to the revised national curriculum, right? So in other words, things that were left out in the curriculum 2005 were sort of added into the revised national curriculum, right? So with the revised national curriculum, we saw that teachers that were untrained, philosophies that were not used accordingly, people were equipped and developed so that they're able to carry out the needs and the curriculum in an effective way. That's where we're going to stop our video for today. I hope that you've learned and you've actually enjoyed it, and feel free to comment and give feedback. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.